So I'm explaining part 3 of PetData example. Please clone it. If you didn't clone it, I will open it from my hard drive because I cloned it before. And this program needs PetData service, Spring Boot. Clone it with IntelliJ. If you didn't clone it, if you did clone it, just open it from hard drive. Okay. So I will open PetData service with IntelliJ using from my hard drive. This is server-side application. I tried to make it as simple as possible. It will be example in the following course. It is written in Java using in-memory database. It is using two database tables. One it is about pets, the other table about pet owners. They're related to each other by one-to-many relationship. But data, this Android application is displaying only one table. It is pets. It is not displaying related data to pet owners. I plan to make an application for the future, later in the course, where it will display data from related tables. It's far more complicated. First, I will explain it with one table. So for simplicity. This program doesn't have any UI except one index HTML file that we will see when program starts. So we'll click Run button. After cloning it, watch messages, and if everything is all right, it will tell that server started on port 8080, localhost 8080. Tomcat started on port 8080. Tomcat is a server. So what happens on port 8080 or 8080? Open browser, type localhost 80 column 8080, and you will see content of this index HTML file. This file is not generated, it is hard-coded, just fixed HTML file. I typed this and just to have a reference to specific places, so for easy understanding. So this is not essential part of the program. This is just for reference. So my program example is picking data from this address, API/pets, and this will be address localhost column 8080 /API/pets. So you see it is localhost column 8080 /API/pets. Data does not come in easy format in this case, and this is how data is generated, like JSON data is generated by Spring Boot framework by default. I overrode only very few things, just to make it more explicit, but the rest is default. So I overrode ID. By default, ID is not displayed. So this is a thing. So if program is written by using Spring Boot as it is, ID will not appear. ID will not appear because they think, or designers of Spring Boot think that this part already shows as ID because API/pet/1 is ID, essentially. So they decided to avoid this duplication, one here and one here. The same about owners. This is not shown by default as well, because they decided that owner ID, you see, owner is here. We can go to this address and know what would be ID of this owner the same way, because it will be reference to the owner in self. It will be owner/ID, and in this case it is clear. So they decided to avoid duplication of the same information. But I decided, let's put it explicitly. They also there is some information that program is ignoring. What it is ignoring? It is ignoring this stuff. It is ignoring ORAN ID, and even ID is ignored. Yes.
Did all this code get auto-generated, or did you have to make
Uh, yeah, I had to type pure data like this doc is Charlie, this doc is doc. Most of it is generated actually. Yeah. It is essentially part of next course in winter 2024. Idea is I included libraries that taking care of it. I created objects and I push it into database. There is a database with it. No. No. There is a database that comes together with libraries. It is in-memory database. So this is why the program is not storing any data. It will store data only while it is running, because when it is stopped, all data in memory is lost. So if I just go into Java and data section, we'll find data initializer. So you see, I created objects by calling constructors, and I call it save. The repository is save, push it into database. And repository code is generated automatically. I didn't have to write repository code. So that was so easy. And of course, it can go as fancy as we want, but it is just a demo for how to use simple features of Spring Boot to create a repository, and also use it in Android. Right? What it is missing, definitely what is missing, is login features. Because if we want to update data stored on server, we need to provide login options, authentication, authorization, and this part is absolutely missing. I went around it, and this is not a way to deal with it. This is just brute force. I created filter that is, where's my filter? That is not, does not allow any access except using get method, and get is read only. So it is brute force to make data not editable from web if it is running on the server. But of course, it's not a solution, because if we want to edit data logically, in most cases we won't. This is not a solution to make it not editable. So this will reject any attempt to change the data. If I send a delete request, it will be rejected essentially. So it is brute force to make it read only. So if it is get, it will chain requests processing further. Otherwise, it will send a response, forbidden response. Okay. So it is just brute force implementation of not readable, not writable data, not deletable data. Yes.
So this only allows reading, or
Yes, it is brute force.
and just brute force.
Yeah. Get it is used for reading. If we need to change it is put, post, delete, and also 1 second. I forgot. Patch also. Patch, it is also used to change data. Yes.
Just wondering, did you create all of the classes and files like filter chain, HTTP?
I copy pasted it.
Oh,
Yeah, so I didn't have to.
so it's all like imported.
Yeah, I copy pasted code. So yeah, Spring Boot does not provide any code generation, unlike Android Studio. You have to either type or copy paste. So it's only it generates internally when program starts, but it's not. This code is not generated. It's either copy pasted or type it. Okay. We will spend more time on it the following course. This is in Java, obviously. This code can be written in Kotlin. I just didn't bother. Because following course in Java, and if I write it in Kotlin, yeah, well, maybe it's easier to read, but you can also read what is here as well. Because it is, Java, it is more straightforward language than Kotlin, because, yeah, it is less compact. Okay. So it is running, and this is what we see, and this is how it is produced. I added IDs just because I wanted to edit for clarity. And this is ID is actually part of the database because I wrote, when I save it, this is generated ID by out increment. So this is what is happening. I don't have control over it, and array starting from here, array of pets starting from here. For this reason, I had to deal with the stuff around it, or this to remove it somehow or ignore it somehow. So it's part of the challenge is to select data that we really need and ignore stuff that we don't need. A browser is not necessarily the best way to see structure of the data. There are other software, and I decided to skip this part right now. We will use it perhaps later. That is designed to interact with JSON format. It helps us to see JSON in foldable way, so we can fold, say, this array by clicking fold, and it will fold it. But I decided to not to spend time in class for installing this software. I hope I can explain the structure without that software. Okay. There is, yes.
So, because you said that it could be folded or not folded, this information.
Oh, no. I mean,
Is it the
with
same way as like the menu folding?
no, it is like this.
Oh. Oh. Okay.
So that software display JSON, so you can fold, say, some structural units. Like you see this code folding, you see?
Oh, like that.
So when you fold code, you can see more stuff on the same screen. So it's easier to understand. This is what it is doing. And also that software, we will use, it's called Postman. It is specifically to display data, display JSON data instead JSON data. Super popular. Postman, we will use it. Okay. As you see, what happens here, we have a curly brace, and curly brace is closing. Right? And it's closing in the end. Right? Then we have another curly brace closing. So we see kind of key value pairs all around. Right? So we have a key and value. In this case, value is another piece of key value pairs. Right? So what we see is, call it JSON, JavaScript object notation. Why it is called JavaScript object notation? Because we can copy paste entire piece and assign it to the variable. It's valid object. The same as this would be also valid object in JavaScript. When we assign it to the variable, we can interact with it as the own object. What are valid data fields? Could be number, could be Boolean, true, false, could be string. Right? This is string. Could be another object. For example, this is the value. No, this is the key, and this is the value. It's another object. Right? Could be array. An array can contain objects. So if we combine arrays and objects together, we can achieve any kind of data. Plus, strings can be used to store binaries if we encode it the proper way. We can even put binaries into strings. So technically, JSON can carry any kind of data. So this is, and it is super popular for this reason on web. Another reason, because it's easier to understand, to process it using JavaScript and other technologies, including what we will use today. It's Moshi and retrofit. So going back to the top, we will see that this is one object that has data field called embedded. And this is name of the data field, and this is object associated with data field. So this data field refers to another object. This object contains data field pets, which is array. This is how array looks in JavaScript, square bracket, of other objects. This is the first object, comma, second object in this array. So these objects are comma separated because they are fields inside of array, JavaScript array. What is the difference between JSON and JavaScript object? In JavaScript object, you can skip parentheses around name of the data field if it can be treated as a valid variable name. So in this case, if you assign it to a variable and use it as an object in JavaScript, you can skip parentheses around word pets because it's a valid name for a variable. It will not confuse compiler. But if this name contains some other characters, for example, plus sign, minus sign, space, it will definitely confuse JavaScript interpreter, right? And it will not work. So in JavaScript, question marks around names of fields, like around ID, around name, are required only if name is bad. If this key is bad, like contains spaces, minus or plus or something like that, commas. But when you send data through internet, it is required anyway. So this is only difference. And another difference, of course, this is objects notation, not objects. Entire piece must be one object. You cannot send more than one object. But you can send array. So JSON can start with square bracket if it contains array. Okay? So starting sign could be curly brace when it is just one object of regular kind, or it could even start with square bracket if it is array. But this is rarely happens, but it does. It does happen. In the example for what I already discussed, Mars photos Android, they grab data from a server, and this server, that's their server, sends array. So their JSON starts with square bracket. Perhaps they made it to make it simpler, and they just hard-coded it because this is for learning to program. It's not realistic, so they decided to make it simpler. Okay. So explanation is video recorded. Please go through that. Right? Going back here. When we access this data, either from browser, or this is from browser, or from Android device, they act as client. So this is server, this client. Okay. So they send request and they will receive response. What we see here, it's part of the response. Data is part of response. There are other things in response that are not displayed, but data, this is data part. And this filter is written such a way that it will print stuff into log. You see processing, request, blah, 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 response sent. It is for easier debugging, and it prints here. Right? I couldn't print content of the response, content of the data easily, because I'm using generated code from database. Database is generated, no, data access layer generated this code. But for example, with dice roller, since I wrote that code from scratch, I'm printing actually a result of the dice roll here. Okay. So just a demo. So if we click reload, browser will send new request. So you see it adds messages from request filter. Process received request. See, it adds stuff. Okay. So this is end of the explanation about services, server, right? Could be okay? No? So next, let's open Android Android program, and I will explain how it is processing the stuff. Okay. So now I'm opening question. So I'm opening Android Studio, and that example is PetData. So it was cloned at the previous lesson. If you didn't clone it, please clone it. And I will start with branch, call it usage server. Okay. I want to start with essential part that I didn't mention in the previous lesson. So let's start from this, because this is essential, as if you don't do it, it won't work. By default, Android applications cannot do much because they're restricted by privacy and security restrictions. They cannot even access internet by default. So in order to access internet, we need to ask permission from operating system, and we can ask it from user. We can ask it two ways. First way, we can record permission inside of Android manifest file. And this is typically, this approach is used for essential parts, essential requirements of your app. If you don't have it, this permission, you cannot do anything. Like displaying data about pets, if this program cannot access internet, it cannot display it. There's no choice. Right? It cannot do anything meaningful. But some permissions are not essential. For example, if it is chat program, access to video, camera may be avoided, right? Because if it is video chat, but you can type chat as well instead. So in this case, you can avoid, yeah. You can go around some permissions that are not allowed, right? In this case, that permission can be asked at runtime. In this case, it's not at runtime. If you ask permissions at runtime, you need to interact with the user, and that involves writing more GUI. So we will cover this, but later. Okay. So this is essential. There is one more essential part that is you need to be aware. That starting about Android 7 or 8, about this time, I'm not sure, but close. By default, access to the services or for data transmission must be done encrypted way using HTTPS protocol. So in this case, this server is not configured for HTTPS protocol. So for this reason, I need to go around this restriction just to make it work. If data is stored on some other server where you can have like real web address, we can create like permanent certificate associated with this address. It's not free, but it can be done. And this way we can configure HTTPS protocol for that server, and it will work fine. This does not really work easy way for something running on the local host. So I decided to avoid this complexity, and I configured this app to allow connection to this server without encryption. So it goes real clean HTTP instead of HTTPS. There is no coding difference, except I asked for permission for clean connection without it. How it is done? I created this line, data extraction rules. No, sorry, not this one. Here it is. This one, a network security config. I inserted this, referring to file network security config in XML folder. So I added this line. Next, in XML folder, I created file, this brute force, like new file, type it name and .xml, and in that file, name this one, not this one, network security config, I made this path. What does it mean? domain configuration and clear traffic permitted. Clear traffic means not encrypted. It's plain HTTP without security encryption to this host. In this host, this is how your computer, how Android's emulator sees your laptop. So Android emulator assign this IP address internally to your laptop. This is how Android sees you, your local host, yes.
So that's to all of the Androids, so it's the same IP for if I were to do it, it would be the same IP.
Yeah, it's your laptop for your Android emulator.
Oh, okay.
So it's use internal network of your laptop to communicate to this local host. It's not visible from outside at all. This is how emulator of Android maps local host of your laptop to Android's operating system running in the emulator. A local host cannot be used because Android itself is local host to itself. So if we open browser in Android emulator, local host will mean Android because it is that operating system. Yes?
Is it using ADB to connect to the emulator?
I don't know. Okay. I don't know how it is implemented inside. It is definitely using REST protocol, but REST protocol is based on HTTP protocol. So under the hood, HTTP and REST protocol is on top of it. This is why we can use browser to access it, because it is essentially the same features. So this is essential if you want to use an encrypted connection. When an encrypted connection can also be useful if you want to grab this data for debugging purpose from file. So you create a file, you serve this file by a regular web server, so you can access it from your app using address of the file. So your Android will see the server serving the file like a data server. But since you are using just regular HTTP server, perhaps not configured for HTTPS, you do this manipulation. Okay. So this is essential, so I emphasize this part. Next. Definitely, since I'm using web access, I need some libraries associated with it. So in app level here, I included this library, and this is only library. Use it for access data. So it is using retrofit tool library in combination with Moshe library. So they've wrapped this into one library. What is retrofit? Retrofit, it is sending request and receiving response, and it is done using plain string. So it will receive it as a string. But Moshe library makes sense of it, and it will create classes, create objects based on the content. So it is essentially Moshe. It is for processing data, and retrofit it is for sending and receiving. Both pieces are currently combined into one line, one library. If we look up example about Mars, they use different library. So they don't use Moshe library, they use Kotlin X features for that. It is a new addition to Kotlin. And because of that, they use additional plugin for that. So they have different libraries. In Mars examples, they have different libraries. Idea is very similar, but it's not copy-pastable. Yes? Capped. It is for processing Kotlin annotations. What is annotation? When we, it's no, it's wrong place. I open it. No, it's right place. For example, we have this part, a line on top of something starting with at. It's called annotation, and capped some plugin that is processing these annotations. So there are two ways of dealing with it, and capped it is like older way, but it is only way that is working with Hilt at this moment. So this is why it is here. Okay. So it is for processing this stuff. Where it is, let's go back. I was in here. All right, so I'm here. So this is for receiving and processing data, and it is retrofit and motion. There are other ways to deal with it. One, it is in already mentioned in Mars example. They use Kotlin X, and it is new way of doing it. And it was alpha very recently. Now it is version 1, and I decided not to mess with it at this moment. But if you're curious, look up Mars example. Idea is the same, but code is not copy-pastable. This is the only difference. There is also one more popular way. It is library JSON, starting with letter G, not J. It's like JSON, but starting with G, and G stands for Google. So it's library written by Google, and it is slightly older library than Moshe. Moshe is faster. A textbook that I'm referring to, like first reference, is using JSON. I compared, very little difference, so I decided not to bother about it. Okay. So I included this library, and this library also. This library is completely separate and completely different logic. This library is picking image from web and displaying inside of your app. This library is called Coil. I already used this library to display images from, what's this called? From assets folder. You can use Coil library to display image from assets folder or from web. In the part 1 and part 2, I used the same library to display it from assets folder. Advantages of using Coil library. This library will preserve local copy. It's like a browser. It will download and store it inside of some app folder. So you save on traffic. Your application save on traffic because it doesn't re-download images, and also images are displayed faster. Also, when you display images, you can also add a broken image icon. You can load an image icon. I didn't bother. I just ignored it. If you want to see how to add broken image icon, look up Mars example. They have it. Mars example also have loading icon and broken data icon. So it has two logics unrelated. One is about downloading data, and one about loading images. Since I already mentioned loading images, I will just quickly show what it is. Pet list screen contains pet list screen. Here it is. When data is loaded, it is using list body to display data. Right? So displaying data is inside of list body. List body contains async image. This function belongs to Coil library. I use model image folder, and this is image name. Image folder, this is web address of the image. So it is that simple. There are additional configurations that you can provide, but this works, and works just fine. So this is web address of the folder that contain images. This is the name of the image. So where it is, I define it here. I created file, image folder URL, and this is it. So my server stores images in this folder. So let's check that. For example, fluffy cat, you see this is images, pets, fluffy cat. So this is images, pets, fluffy cat. Oh, okay. So this one. And this is because it is not localhost, this is how it is with your computer is viewed from Android device. Okay. Next. One thing that I forgot to tell, but it's also important, debugging is not really friendly. When you download data from the internet or from a server, debugging is not very friendly, but you just need to get patient and eventually find all issues. You may need to display some stuff to see what is going on, at least to see that is data received or not received or something like that. And in this case, log helps. What is log? First of all, when program is crashing or something bad happens, data will be, so I will close server so it's not confusing me. Data will appear in logcat. So there is a tab called logcat. This is logging system of Android. It's not empty only when it is empty because program is not running. I have to run it in order to display some images, stuff. Okay. So when program dies for any reason, it would be some crash messages. Sometimes it doesn't say anything, but in many cases, it does give you some clue. If you read carefully, top to bottom, left to right, sometimes you have to scroll it horizontally to see all of it. It may give you clue. Most likely it will, but unfortunately not in every case. Especially when you deal with receiving data, okay, from network. So what else helps? You can display your own messages inside of logcat if you want. For example, how many objects received or what is received. So you can print it in logcat. Okay. So first, let's run it to see some messages here. So I'm starting this program. So, okay. I will close layout expector. I will tell what it is. Open. Where's my Androids? Running devices. Oh, here it is. Okay. And logcat. I type it filter, and filter can remove stuff. So, okay. What it is? Is it running? Let's make sure. Emulator. Okay, let's try. I'm going to view model, list view model. Okay. And I added this part that you don't have it, so I deleted it. I added this yesterday in class, so I will show what I added later. 1 second, press to see suggestions. Package name mine. I didn't have any messages from package name man. If it crash, it will be. Okay. Okay, let's start it. It will be probably boot messages when we start. Let's stop it and start it. Look at. Oh, here it is. Okay. So there are some messages. You see that some messages come with E, it is error, and emulator does have some error. And many of these errors are not important. It still runs fine. So D stands for debug, V stands for verbose, and you can limit what you display based on the scope of it, debug, verbose. Most of it, when you display it, you either display error yourself or debug messages. Debug is just extra information for you to debug, and error, you display that something wrong. Warning is also warning, you see. So they will appear on right side in different colors depending on your situation. Right? There are some things coming from emulator that shows error just fine, it works. It's not your error, essentially. Okay. Something happens inside of emulator. So let's display some image, let's display some data using logcat to see how it appears. For example, you receive data using, you send load PetData list, right? And you ask at repository get all pets, so this is a list of pets that you received. Okay. So for you, if, for example, for debugging, your debugging purpose, you want to know if data is actually received. So it's not empty string or something, okay? So for, or empty array. So in order to do this, you can use log D, it is debugger, or debug, or log E, it is for error. Okay, so you type a log D in tab, and it will create code for you, log.d. If it is error, you want to display error, it will be E. What is tag? It is any string what you like. Typically, it is name of the class, but it doesn't have to be. Okay. You can use it to filter, so you don't have to look through gazillion messages in order to find your printout. Okay. So I will just use name of the class because of lack of fantasy. Okay. So I copied this one, but it is possible that you will have several logds inside of one file. So for this reason, they define some variable that way you can assign the string. So you can refer to the variable instead of typing the same string again. So typically in Android code, like an example, they create static variable tag per file or per class. So like they do companion object will create static variables. And in companion object, they define like val, like const val tag, and just any tag that you will want to tag your message. So you can search for it or filter for it. So I use the name of the class. Okay. So now tag variable is defined, and what to display, whatever you want. It is inside of the string. So we can say loaded. Then I want to insert how many, so I use $ pets. Okay, how many pets? Pets. This is array. In order to get length, no, it is list. In order to get length of the list, it is pets, and I believe it is size or something. Okay, let's check. Yeah, size. Okay, it is length of the list. Yes.
Sorry, what was the log D again? Log.d?
It is logger. It is log messages. This is all log messages. In logcat, so it goes here. D stands for debugging. It will appear with blue letter D here. Okay. So you can classify them by this stuff. You can also filter them. There is option to filter, display only error messages, display only debug messages. Somewhere we can find it. Yeah, if you look carefully, we'll find it. I don't want to spend time on it. Most of the time we use arrow, E, or D. Other things is just to make it fancy. Okay. So now this program is not reloadable, like you have to stop and start it again to get the messages. So I will stop it and run. Okay. And now if I open logcat, it is somewhere here. If I scroll it, I will find it. But easier way to deal with it is to paste pet list view model tag, and this is loaded 7 pets. Loaded 7 pets. And this was previous problem message, because it was displayed before I deleted and created it again. Bottom line, logcat is not cleared between runs. Another thing to remember, logcat is not cleared between runs. So if it was error, clean it, so the same error will not confuse you. Okay. So it is from, this was from previous run, this is from current run. Okay. How to clear? Like this, clear logcat. Okay. Let's do this stuff again. Logcat, here it is, you see. So this may help. At least if it does not show anything, it means data is not received. Okay. Also, if something goes wrong, this part will throw exception. I'm catching exception, and this will print it here. Also helps in debugging. For example, I will stop the server just for showing that issue happens, right? So where's my server? Somewhere. Here it is. I will stop it and I will try to access it, right? So I stop it, start it. Loading data and boom, error, right? I'm going to logcat. Arrow is not shown because I'm filtering it. So I need to get rid of this piece. And now this part will appear somewhere here, but most likely it's warning, not arrow, this one. E print stack trace will be here. So let's scroll it. Here it is. Connection. Fail it to connect to this one. Here it is. Because it's not running. Yes? Because it's not printed with logcat, so we don't have a control. It was printed with stack trace. It's different function. We didn't use logcat with it. And E, it's not an error, it's an exception. I'm calling method of exception to print it. Okay. So again, if something goes bad, careful reading may help. Not necessary. In most cases, it will. So this is a typical debug thing that may be helpful. Part 3 is optional. So maybe you don't want to have it, but if you want, this is how to deal with it. Yes? No. It is for practice. No. On midterm part 1, not even 2. I don't know. Okay, I need to think about it. We didn't reach that point yet. Okay. We are traveling hopefully in the right direction. I will see how far we can go. Okay. But you will have this in some assignment for sure. either assignment 3 or assignment 4. Not from local server, but probably from web somewhere, like display weather or something like that. Hopefully by the time you will have more practice, but warning, it takes time to debug this part. This part is less than friendly. So how data is processed? You already saw that I'm just calling method of some repository, and it gives me list of objects. So from the point of view of your model, it is the same. I'm calling method of the repository that gives me a list of objects. But the magic is behind repository. So repository is separating layers of the app. It is separating data access layer from the rest of it. So let's go here and see what happens. This is my data access layer. I still have this fake data repository, but it's not used. I decided not to delete it. It is still there. How my repository ends up here, PetData repository. This is interface, but it picks not fake data repository implementation, but it picks implementation called PetData repository impl, this one. How do I know? This is traveling between, traveling according to dependency injection. So this icon, it is where it's coming from. So this is where it's coming from. This is where it goes. Okay. So let's click for interesting where it goes. It goes into some generated class, right? Not interesting. So this is generated class. Pay at least your model underscore healed modules, it's generated class. It does go somewhere, but not interesting. But where this path is coming from, repository, I click this path. Here it is. It is coming from abstract class module that is linking interface to implementation. This is implementation, right? So where this is coming from, again, I'm clicking on this link, where it's coming from. Here it is. It's coming from code in PetData repository implementation, inject, constructor, PetData API. So this is also interface. Right? But the dependency injection system provides object, and we will find where it is. But let's first look inside of implementation. Right? So let's do backwards trace. Okay, where the data is coming from. So PetData repository is interface, and we implement function get all pets, define it in interface, define it in interface PetData repository, this one. Override means you implement it. That function is declared as suspend. Suspend, it's a marker for something that takes a while to get. Or is it longer calculation, or you send request and you wait for response? Yes?
Suspend prevents the function from being killed, right?
No. Suspend, it is marker for the system execute this function special way. But for us and for compiler, we need to put this code in coroutine context. Coroutine context, we start independent task from GUI. So if we execute this function outside of independent task or try, it will not compile. So compiler will make sure that it is executed in coroutine context. So this is suspend function, and in my view model, I'm launching, you see, view model scope, I'm launching independent task. And inside of it, I'm calling repository get API. So if I remove this launch, if I create just regular function, instead of view model scope launch, it will not compile, it will underline it in red. So also compiler tries to save me from doing bad things. Okay. What happens here? By default, it will start it in main dispatcher, and main dispatcher is used for GUI tasks. It will not run, it will not freeze GUI, but it will use it as separate GUI task. And it will try to share time, processing time, with other GUI tasks. So it will not freeze GUI if it's just like this. But it's better to take longer parts into background. So because GUI dispatcher, like main dispatcher, is not optimized for I/O. So inside of repository implementation, I'm switching the task to dispatcher's I/O. Dispatcher's I/O, it is dispatcher for the task, or starters for the task, designed for input-output. What is specific for input-output? They may take for a while, it's one specific, and most of the time it's just waiting, because something else is doing the work. Okay? So there are several dispatchers, at least main. Main, it is for user interface tasks. A default dispatcher, it is for long execution task. So for example, your app is doing computations for some reason, and you don't want to freeze GUI, obviously. So that will be executed in default dispatcher. It's called .default. Okay. Dispatchers.default. And in this case, it is specifically optimized for input-output, long, but most of the time you just wait. Okay. Here it is. And what happens here, I call PetData API get remote data, and it is returning some object, remote data I defined in this object. Okay. So I defined in this object, and it is, I will tell what is this PetData API later. Okay. It is, for now, it is injected. Okay. So it is returning pet remote data object. This remote data object contains pets. So essentially, I'm trying to imitate content of this. So I need to start it because I stop it, right? I stop it to show crash. So I need to start server. Okay, so where's my store? Okay, start. See, I'm trying to imitate structure of the data. I define a class myself, data class, and I call it this remote data. And this will match entire piece. That object will contain data field embedded. Right? And that embedded field will be this one. Will contain array of pets. So I'm trying to imitate data that coming from internet. Okay. This is object that I receive, remote data. It is this one. That contains embedded, contains pets. Okay. Where did I define it? Any place what you like, but I put it in remote package. So this is my remote data. This is data class that contains data field embedded. Type remote embedded. And it is this remote embedded. Start here. Okay? This is data class contains embedded. This is remote embedded. Remote embedded contains variable pets, which is list of remote pets. Field pets, which is list, which map it to array of remote pets. And this is remote pet starts here. Okay? So We create list of classes to imitate the data that comes. And Mocha library uses these classes to build the tree, what we received. So we receive data not as a string, but tree of objects created by Mocha library, based on classes that we use to describe the data. And this is where it can crash, because if we miss something, or our description of data is not perfect, it will crash. It makes, most of the time it will tell you what happened. Okay. And remote pet. Please notice that remote pet does not contain all fields here in the pet. You see? For example, I don't have ID. I don't have owner ID, right? General rule: if you don't need some field, do not include it in your classes. So Mocha will ignore it. The same about other libraries, use it in the same way. If we don't need specific data, for example, we don't need ID of a pet in this case. So I didn't include it here, so ID of a pet will be ignored. The same as owner ID will be ignored. Okay. So in order to receive data as linked objects, we need to define classes for that, and somehow start it from here, right? So this starting place, and this is our object, either what we receive or another wrapper object that describes. No, it is either what we need, or maybe we don't need it, but we'll have to put it there because it's matching the data. Okay? Because we cannot skip this part. We can skip things like that do not break the consistency, right? Questions? Yes?
So for every time, so for this right here, you just need this class so we're able to grab the objects from the JSON, right?
Yes. We create these classes only because we want data as objects, not as a one long string. So we created these classes, and this remote data is given us by by this API. Okay, I'm going back here. You see, this remote data object is received by PetData API get remote data. Okay, and this PetData API is injected here. All right. So where it's coming from? Let's watch. This is taking us to the place where it's coming from. It's coming from the module I created called retrofit module. So this object is created by retrofit module. So it's coming from here. A PetData API is magically made by this. Okay. PetData API, let's see what it is first. PetData API. PetData API is interface, but we receive it to an object. And as you see, there is not much code in between, right? This is interface, and that piece is giving us object. So let's look at this interface first. We ask it get remote data. This is remote data, but what is this magic part? Get, it means generate get web request. There are several kinds of requests. Get it is default one. And get, it's like when we type address in a browser, this is get request. When we click on link, it's also get request. So it's default one. When the browser display image on the page, it's also sending get request. But there are other requests. So we're sending default request to this address. This is address. But it is not entire length address. It is just last part of it, or some part of it, last part of it. So I have a retrofit module, and I have this set as base URI. So address in the get is appended to this address. So technically, it's sending request to HTTP blah 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 slash p API slash pets, and it is where actually my data is coming from, right? It is sending to this API slash pets. So where this is coming from? This is just variable. But when we create a retrofit object, so this provides is creating retrofit object by executing this code. Retrofit builder base URI, this is base URI, add converter factory, and this is Moshi library that is doing the processing. So Moshi converter factory build. So this code is creating a object of retrofit kind, a retrofit object, and it is singleton, it's only one. I don't need more than one, so let's be careful about it, keep it one, so it is singleton. Next, in order to create PetData API, retrofit, we need retrofit object, so it is coming from here, right? So it's coming from here, right? So this function is creating a retrofit object, and this retrofit object is injected as a parameter of PetData API function that is creating, yes?
Sorry, what's the retrofit function again? What does it do?
A retrofit, it's an object that generates objects that we need. Okay, so a retrofit object, it's an object provided by the library that creates object that you need for PetData API. So, okay, this function is taking a retrofit object, and you see what it's calling. It's calling method create on the retrofit object. And what is this? It is class of PetData API. So PetData API, it's an interface. Class.java, it is just description of that interface. In Java, class, every object has class field, and class field, it is description of object. Okay. In this case, it's description of interface, because this is not a class, this is interface. So you provide description of that interface into retrofit object, and retrofit object creates implementation of that interface. So all scanning features are generated by retrofit object based on the interface that you provide. So this line creates implementation of PetData interface. So this function is returning objects that satisfy requirements of this PetData interface. So this is magic of retrofit. We don't have to write scanner for JSON, but we need to define classes that describe the data, and it creates scanner for us by implementing this interface. Okay. And we already know where it goes. This is where it goes. It goes into implementation of PetData repository. So what does it do? It gives us remote data. Remote data has embedded, that has pets, but these pets are not the pets that we know, right? What pets we know? We know pets from domain, this pet. And pet is not necessarily remote pet. Okay, it's different class. If I compare it, I will probably realize it is the same. But why do I have two classes? The reason is that I separating concerns. Concern for getting data from internet and concern for displaying data in my program. Why? Because internet may, I'm lucky because I wrote this server. I could create the data on the server the way I want, but it's not necessarily the case. So the data, how you receive it, is not necessarily the data what you want. So you may need transformation in between. Plus, the data, how you receive it may change because they may change standard, how they send the data. So for this reason, we need to separate concerns. So although these classes are almost the same, and perhaps they are reusable, replaceable, they call it accidentally the same. So this is actual terminology, accidentally the same. And if they are accidentally the same, we cannot rely on this accident for a long time because something may change. For example, I want to edit my pet class for internal reasons. I reorganized my code, I want to edit it. But data coming from the server is still the same. In this case, I would need to change transformation between two classes, but I don't have to redesign my code. Right? So these classes are accidentally the same, and they should be separate. So, but it creates extra class, extra task, because pets in this case it's a list of pet data, but I need to create list of pets, remote pets, but I need to create. So what map is doing? Pick one object, pick object from one list, apply lambda function, creates object into another list. So it is default parameter of this lambda function. It's one object at a time from the list, and I call method to pet to create pet from pet data, remote pet. So it is remote pet, to pet creates pet. But I definitely need this function somewhere, and I define it here. So I define it function, what's this called? External function. Right? External function, we learned that external function, it's a function defined almost belonging to the class, but define it outside. So it behaves like it belongs to the class, but it is defined outside. So when we define external function, we use name of the class, dot, and this is name of the external function. So I define it to pet outside of remote pet class here, because this is where I want it. This refers to remote pet. So what I use, I just call constructor to create these objects. I could use a regular function and use return statement, but I use shortcut. When we have only one statement, we don't have to use curly braces and return statement, we can just assign it. So I assign constructor call. So I call pet constructor to convert remote pet to pet. Okay. And I use it here, map on the list. Please pay attention to this because it will be almost in every example later on. Okay, so I need to convert list of some objects into list of other objects, and I use map. Map takes parameter. This is lambda function given to the map, and it is default parameter of this lambda function. It is one element of the list at a time. So it picks one element applied to pet, puts in output array, output list, right? Another one to pet. I'm converting one list to another list. List of remote pets to list of pets. Okay? Here it is, and it's also done in background, right? Because it is in dispatchers.io. It is in background, yes?
You're saying map allows it to make a copy of the list and puts it.
It's not a copy, it's another list.
It's another list.
Yes.
And puts it away.
Yeah.
Or like
And
puts it
first
away.
list survives. It doesn't. It's not discarded. It is still assigned to the variable, and when variable goes out to the scope, it will be discarded. Yeah. So it creates another list. It's not exactly a copy because we're doing transformation, right? So,
And this other list is just to allow us to use this data now.
yeah, because I want list of pets, not remote pets. Because the rest of the code is written for class pet, not remote pet. If we compare, we may find that it's almost the same, but I'm not relying on this because it is accidentally the same. Yes?
So just curious, I can't seem to see any of this. Do I have to recopy everything from?
What do you mean?
Like I don't see.
Oh, you need to switch this because it's, in my case, it's use it remote server. You need to switch branch to use it server. Click on use it server and click Okay, checkout. Click on use it server and select checkout.
Yeah, I'm already in check out of it, can I? No, it just says new thing. Or update. Can I press update?
Yeah, probably. It should be there.
Oh,
It is in I'm here in pet data repository impl class. Pet data repository impl.
No. Okay. Thank you.
You found it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is how data is received and transformed and displayed. Questions? And the rest of it is the same because we started from view model, and above view model it is exactly as part 2 because it's no change. Okay. So we trace it back to parts where it is received. So this is starting point, and this is data source. So class that is generated from by retrofit from this interface, it is data source. So today we will learn a slightly more complicated part. In the interface, it's more complicated because it will have parameter. In this case, there's no parameter. It's all data. Right? But in the next example, we'll have parameter in the interface, but data will be simpler. So we cannot have complicated thing in all directions right away. Okay. So let's finish it, have break, and after break I will explain dice roller examples that takes data from internet.